Hello and welcome to Gegenpressing, the Bundesliga podcast. I'm Manu, and as often I'm joined by Matt Ford, and also on the show is Dan Whiten, friend of the show. Haven't seen you in a while. Dan, how's it going, buddy?
Yeah, good, good. Always good to be back. I was just saying when we were chatting before, it's been a big weekend of lots of stoppage time goals, so that's always a test for your match copy. But it's been interesting.
Yeah, I was at I'm in California doing Thomas Müller this weekend, and they did me a favor by being up 3-0 at halftime, which makes it much easier for match
Yeah,
copy. 90% of your text is written, and then of course when San Diego made it briefly 3-1, I was like sweating a little bit, and then they had the player sent off, and I'm like, okay, I can finish typing this up. But there's nothing worse than a late equalizer. It's like, especially if it's like a 2-0 or like a 3-2 or something like that, and you're like ready, and it's like, oh, the
yeah.
worst.
Yourself, and this is embarrassing to say, but when it happens, like when your own team scores a late equalizer or a late winner, you end up saying, "What?" Like you're annoyed at your own team, which is, you don't want to tell the other fans, but yeah, sometimes. I got to excuse my voice. I was singing karaoke last night and not
Yeah.
particularly well, and so I kind of lost my voice a little bit. Um, not related to football at all.
No, no, no. We're totally not at Union Berlin singing and dancing.
It's a banger track for sure.
Matt, how's it going with you? You had a pretty busy weekend.
Yeah, really busy. I was surprised to hear that Dan was out celebrating Heidenheim's last minute winner. I mean, obviously, he had a big night out on the back of that.
Yeah, noted Heidenheim fan Dan Whiten.
Lifelong Frank Schmidt
Actually, I
supporter.
like.
Yeah, but no, it was a really, really busy weekend. Like you said, it's a proper sort of journalist complaint, isn't it, with the late goals? But
Yeah.
Yeah,
this weekend, I don't think there was a game any of us could have picked, to be honest, across sort of both leagues where we wouldn't have had that problem. There were late goals flying in all over the place. I was at Schalke in the second division on Friday night, and that was also a relatively late winner from Schalke. We'll get onto that. Um, Leverkusen Dortmund on Saturday night. I was at that, and well, I've all seen Dortmund in recent weeks. I was convinced that that 2-0 lead was going to quickly turn into a late 2-2, so I didn't dare write anything before that. And then yeah, Sunday we've seen Hamburg, a late winner, spectacular. We'll get onto that. Frankfurt with a late equaliser, dodgy pen.
so dodgy.
Um, and well, at least I tell you what, if we'd have covered Freiburg Mainz properly, that would have been nice and easy. Freiburg did a nice job for us. But
Not
yeah, it's been
easy
a
for
really,
not easy for
really
Mainz
entertaining
fans.
weekend.
Not easy for Mainz fans.
No, not quite. But any
Well,
journalist covering that one would have a nice easy and early Feierabend.
that's what we call an easy assignment. Yeah, no, it is such a proper journalist complaint. I think we're the only ones who moan about last minute drama.
Hate them. Hate those goals. Oh
Yeah.
well.
Um, yeah, you mentioned it. You were at Schalke, 2-1 win over Paderborn. Um, a late winner, not that late. I mean, 86th minute is manageable. Like it's one of those where you're like hovering over like when you have to do an on the whistle match report where you're like, oh, come on, like, and then you're still sitting there after the 2-1 and you're waiting to see whether that's actually like the final product or not, right?
Mm.
But yeah, it ended up being a 2-1 win. You wrote about it for the Substack. This win catapults Schalke to the top of the table. 31 points, 2 points ahead of Paderborn. More importantly, 4 points ahead of Elversberg, who are sitting in the promotion relegation spot. We both wrote a bit about Schalke this week, and me about all the players that they have lost over the years and decades, that walked through the academy, prolific academy, right? Um, they're in a place, I think, where they were hoping to be, but not necessarily dare to hope to be, under Muslic. It feels like to me when I covered them a little bit ahead of the season, Matt, that where they are now is a little bit ahead for the project.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way of putting it. It's just certainly going well. And if you consider that in the big picture, they're coming off the back of two consecutive relegation battles, and not relegation battles in the Bundesliga, but relegation battles in the second division. It certainly looked like a very, very serious and realistic threat at times in the past two seasons at the bottom of Division Two. And I think we've touched on it before that had they found themselves going down to the third division, you'd be looking at a pretty catastrophic scenario for Schalke. Fortunately for them, like you said, the current revamp under Frank Baumann as sporting director, obviously at Werder Bremen for years, did a good job, and head coach Milan Muslic, who they brought in from Plymouth, they've got off to an absolutely flying start. I like to try and keep an eye on Schalke, even though they are in Division Two. We can't really cover them or even other second division teams as much as we'd probably like to, just for time constraints, really. But the stories are fascinating, and Schalke is always right up there. And I was pleased this time that it was a really, really good performance. It was a really, really good game, which Paderborn contributed to as well. And really worthwhile to head up there on a Friday night, much more so than the last time I went, which was, I think, the 1-0 defeat against Holstein Kiel earlier in the year, which it was their only home defeat of the season so far, but it just so happened that it was the one that I turned up to, and it was a terrible game, and I just wondered why on earth I was spending a Saturday afternoon in Gelsenkirchen watching that. But I came away from Gelsenkirchen on Friday night, absolutely, ecstatic, and not for any sympathies towards Schalke, but I thought it was a really good game, and the project that they've got going there is on balance going really well. The fact they came from behind, they went into the game second with Paderborn as the league leaders, and then they fell behind. It wasn't really clicking in the first half. I think Paderborn probably deserved the lead. But then, I think it took Schalke about 40 minutes to get back to the type of football which Milan Muslic says that he wants to play.
Yeah.
He talks about he wants to play simple football, straightforward, uncomplicated football, and that's exactly how the first goal came about. Really good move involving Sulla and Karaman through the middle of the park, and really, really good finish. And that set the tone for the second half. Brian Lasma off the bench for the winner. Absolutely outstanding finish under pressure in the final 5 minutes, 1-on-1. Just lobs it over the goalkeeper, to send Schalke top of the league. It's not where I don't think anyone would have seen them at the start of the year. I think the aim in Gelsenkirchen in the mid to long term is, of course, promotion.
Yeah.
That's always been the case. It has to be. But in the short term, no one around Schalke would have said the aim for this season is to go up. It wouldn't have been seen as realistic. Here we are going into December, and Schalke are top of the second division and looking extremely good.
I mean, it could happen, right?
It could. I mean, we've seen these Division Two promotion races in the past. They are absolutely wild affairs. It was only a couple of months ago at the start of the season when everyone was tipping Hanover. I think they went unbeaten in the first 3 or 4 games, if I remember correctly, and they were looking really, really good. They've dropped off a little bit now. Even last season, even Magdeburg gave it a good run, and now they're mired in a relegation battle. It's turned out now behind Schalke, you've actually got 3 of the, with respect, relatively smaller clubs who have sort of taken up position behind Schalke now in Paderborn, Darmstadt, and Elversberg. So, I mean, on balance, you look at purely on paper, you look at Schalke as being the big favourites there, but we all know that the paper in Gelsenkirchen these days is really not necessarily worth its weight there. It'll be a huge battle for them. They've had a lot of injuries to deal with. Christopher Antwi Ajay has only just come back. He only got 60 minutes on Friday night. But Yeah, there is quality there in El Fawzi through the middle, Kenan Karaman, the captain. Musa Silla is an absolute joy to watch. Fantastic player. Um, and Yeah, another player who stood out. Actually, you highlighted him in your piece on
Mm,
some of the youth talents they brought through. Mika Valentovits. I thought the first time I'd actually watched him properly in the flesh, thought he cut a really, really calm and collected figure at right back for Schalke,
mm.
both defensively and also providing a really good outlet overlapping down the right hand side as well. So yeah, another thing that people in Schalke fans are proud of, the youth academy, the Knappenschmiede. So they'll be happy to see young talents coming through as well. So yeah, came away from Gelsenkirchen with a very positive feeling this time, and fingers crossed for them it continues.
Yeah, and I mean the second Bundesliga table is always crazy. Hertha were on sixth, are only 2 points behind promotion. Sorry, 3 points behind Paderborn were second, right? Darmstadt in there, Hannover in there, Elversberg and Paderborn, as you mentioned. That's why the Bundesliga is always so entertaining in that you never really know who's going to end up at the top of the table. Unfortunately, boys, that's not going to be the case with the Bundesliga. Bayern Munich come back really late to beat St. Pauli 3-1. The third goal was almost like a hockey style empty netter with Nicholas Jackson scoring there. It really was the Luis Diaz goal, I thought, and was it the 93rd minute to make it 2-1 and secure Bayern Munich's win. Then we see this with Bayern Munich time and time again. You think you have them, and then you just don't.
Well, I mean, you were sitting next to me at Union against Bayern and took a little picture of my report while Union was 1-up, which said late Kane goal, whatever. And
Okay, before you praise yourself too much, you said late Kane winner, and that was not what happened
that's
here.
true. That's true. I've seen the movie before, and that was what happened against Union was very much the exception to the rule.
Mm,
Yeah, they just seem to manage to do it. You feel bad for St. Pauli. It's the best they've played in a long time. You would have thought that after everything that happened in London on Wednesday, that perhaps Bayern had come back down to earth a little bit. They seem to be kind of defying expectations that they don't have a very deep squad. They're running more than anyone else. I don't know what the running statistics are like at the moment, but for a team with that much quality, they're running more than most other clubs in the
mm,
Bundesliga. I feel like it's going to catch up with them at some point. Like a week ago against Freiburg, I thought that could have been the case. 2-0 down. You think, okay, we've seen that in recent seasons with Bayern that these things have happened, and then the same against Pauli, but they just have the quality to come back. I mean, against Freiburg, Michael Olise was incredible. He was but then last Saturday or yesterday, it was Luis Diaz's turn to step up and just that the goal he created for Guerrero was like something that only really he can do. He was on the ground and people were standing around him, but somehow he got to poke his foot a pass through to Guerrero, and similar to what he did against Union, where just these kind of things that he looks like he's on a twister mat somehow, moving around, and it's he's a pretty unique, special player. And then obviously his winner in stoppage time was he was right on the man on the spot. So yeah, I mean I think the ship sailed a long time ago that we might have a title race, but I
mm.
guess to have a little bit more suspense might be nice. But then Bayern just have that quality of, Harry Kane has a quiet game again, like he did yesterday. There's someone else who can come along and do something incredible. And we've seen it all season. The first real blip was that Champions League game against Arsenal.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big difference in that Arsenal game was that Luis Diaz wasn't on the field. You mentioned the running stats. Bayern Munich are third in the Bundesliga in distance covered. Hoffenheimer first with 1,485 kilometers. Then it's Erste FC Köln with 1,471.3 kilometers. And then it's Bayern Munich with 1,471.2 kilometers. So they're second by 0.1 kilometers, third, I mean. But in this game against St. Pauli, they actually outran St. Pauli, not by much. It's 126.17 kilometers versus 125.9 kilometers. But St. Pauli, this is typical for relegation candidates. They run a lot more with the ball than teams do that are usually in the top echelon, in the Bundesliga or anywhere in any of the top 5 leagues. And Bayern Munich are very much, their style of football is so different this season, that they company doesn't just want to have the ball and let the ball do the sweating, to quote Roberto Baggio, who famously said that, right? But he also wants his teams to outwork your opponent. They're almost playing man to man everywhere on the pitch, right? And that has been a tactic that has worked really well for them, with the exception of that Arsenal game. And I think one of the reasons why that didn't work against Arsenal is because in Luis Diaz they didn't have one of their most important pressing players. But I do wonder also if the Arsenal game was that first crack in the armor, in terms of, they're running a lot, they're spending a lot of energy. We are now 12 match days into the Bundesliga season. What is it, 5 games in the Champions League now, right? You add to that the Club World Cup. And so, like, the question that we have to ask you guys is, like, are the cracks showing? Does it matter because, like, the gap is already so high to the other Bundesliga teams? Will it matter ultimately? I don't know, but, like, are we seeing the first cracks here appearing in this tactic maybe backfiring at some point? What do you think, Dan?
I mean, one thing that Bayern have done for the last decade is they start really, really well in all competitions, including the Champions League. What we saw last year in PSG's case was that you don't actually need to start that well in this new format. And so there's been a real drop-off, a real dip for Bayern in the last few years. I'd say the last 5-6 years, February and March, they've dropped a few games. In the Bundesliga, it hasn't tended to matter because they're so far ahead. The challenge for the other clubs in the Bundesliga is to stay close so that they might have a shot at catching up. But Bayern are already pretty far ahead and will be more by then. But this is a club that judges itself on whether it will win the Champions League or not. If they are trying to set records for the best start, if they're really, really opening with such a flurry, and then they fall away early in the new year, then there won't be much to show for it. I think one thing that's clear as well is that they really want to win the cup. Like, they've played full strength lineups in the cup every time. Upamecano was basically rested on the weekend for the cup at Union Wednesday. So, like, that's another stressor for them. That, I mean, when they were booted the last few years, I remember Harry Kane was on the bench when they lost at Saarbrücken, for example. And so they were playing, not playing the kids completely, but playing a weaker 11. But they're definitely not doing that this year. So, again, who knows? They've got the best fitness coaches in the game. They're eating those pretzels every day and the special Bavarian water. But I guess we'll just see what happens come early in the new year.
That Bavarian water, which I believe is about 6.8% proof, isn't it? It comes out the taps.
It's Weissbier. They serve it as an energy drink. No, what do you think, Matt?
I think it's a really interesting constellation of, like, circumstances which have sort of gathered around Bayern. We've talked about the size of the squad so much, and I think you said before, are the cracks starting to show? I think that's maybe a little bit too extreme. Just cracks are showing, but it is obviously a question which we have highlighted before. It's a question that everybody asked before the start of the season regarding Bayern Munich and Borussia Dortmund, as to how exactly is this brand new Club World Cup and having no pre-season going to affect them. And it actually seemed at the start that it seemed to benefit them, because they came in with an already pre-established rhythm. Vincent Kompany has, whether he's just doing it to maintain morale and to encourage his team and to paint it in a good way, I don't know, or maybe it's genuine, but he has sort of motioned quite a few times that this small squad is actually a really good thing for Bayern Munich. On the one hand, it's created a really, really healthy competition because everybody knows that they're needed. So that's been good for the spirit inside the team. It's been good in terms of bringing through young players. Tom Bischoff had a good game against St. Pauli, I thought. Obviously, Leonard Carl starred at least in the first half. He did really well against Arsenal. And as Dan was saying, they have these qualities all over the pitch in different forms, so that even when a Michael Olise has a quiet couple of games, as he did against St. Pauli, even if Harry Kane has quiet games like he did against Freiburg, only scores one, or against Arsenal where he struggled, you have players stepping up. Yeah, against Union Berlin and against St. Pauli, as Dan said, it was Luis Diaz. He's absolutely incredible in those tight areas. We saw it on the byline before his goal against Union Berlin, where he manages to rescue the ball and finish from an impossible angle. And against St. Pauli, he produces that absolutely incredible setup while lying on the ground. Perhaps the one constant throughout Bayern's game in terms of performance levels, at least in the past few weeks, is Joshua Kimmich. Outstanding ball out to Serge Gnabry in London in the build-up to Bayern's equaliser, and a just as good, arguably even better ball on his, I think weaker foot. He's not left-footed, is he, Joshua Kimmich? I don't
No,
think.
he's right-footed.
I mean, he might as well just label himself as two-footed now, because to produce a left-footed cross that in 3 minutes into injury time in a game
Hey
in
Matt,
which, as
there's
you
this
said,
there's this really great homepage. You might have heard of it. It's called Transfermarkt and has the right
no,
has feet
never
listed.
heard of it.
Yeah, apparently it's right-footed.
I'll have to have a look. Just send me a link later. I've never heard of
I'll show you later.
that. But yeah, like I said, to produce that sort of cross on his weaker foot after 93 minutes of a game in which, as you were saying regarding the running statistics, Bayern have run almost more than almost any other team, and to land it in the area which he does, with the pace that he does, with the dip that he does, so that it's, and even if Luis Diaz misses that, Harry Kane's there to get it. I don't think you can praise that highly enough. Really, yeah, really impressive on lots of levels from Bayern. Have to say, very just bitterly disappointed from San Pauli's point of view. I think, like Dan said, probably, I mean, easily by far their best performance, at least of this terrible run that they're on. Is it 8 or 9 defeats in a row now?
Right.
9. Arguably the best performance since the derby against Hamburg. I would say. Yeah, so solid, which takes incredible concentration to remain that solid and that disciplined under so much Bayern Munich pressure in such an atmosphere, in such a place to go as a, well, not promoted team, it's second season now. And they just couldn't quite hold on. But I think it sets it up for I think the inevitable San Pauli win in Cologne next week. To be honest, I think that just seems absolutely typical now.
No. Köln have the best forward in the world, and Said Al-Mala, they'll be fine.
Another pretty late winner, equaliser. Yeah, this weekend, Said Al-Mala. But yeah, disappointing from my point of view, but they can take a lot from that. And particularly, maybe it'll give them a little bit of comfort to know that they didn't completely collapse and get blown away like their neighbours did in Munich.
Well, I mean, I think that's the only way you can play against Bayern Munich. Like, the work rate that they're playing with right now is so high that Arsenal kind of showed that as well. Like, what Arsenal's football isn't pretty by any stretch of the imagination at the moment. Like, someone in our subscriber chat called them Stoke Platinum, like just is now making the rounds on the internet.
Clearly, Rory Delap with his
But like,
fill-ins was well ahead of his time.
But it works. Like, that seems to be a way to work it. Union Berlin did the same thing to them. Like, there's very simple things that you can do to hurt us by Munich side, like being good at set pieces, lobbing the ball over the defense, because like when they have to turn quickly, it's hard, and essentially trying to match their work rate.
Yeah, it's that
these things
paradox,
don't.
though, isn't it? That Pauli would arguably have, and they have had more success with that style of
Yeah.
football away at a team like Bayern Munich than they would with the same style of football
So
against pretty
like,
much anyone else in the
let's list the teams
Bundesliga.
that have hurt Bayern this year, right? Like Wien, Wiesbaden. Then we had Union Berlin. Then we had Stoke Platinum, and then we no, we had St. Pauli. What do they all have
Mm.
in common, right? So
Mm.
like, yeah. So
Yeah,
basically,
I mean, it's similar tactics that Pauli did
yeah.
damage to Borussia Dortmund on the opening day, and of course they tore apart Hamburg as well with the
Mm,
with similar tactics. So yeah, it's a bit of a paradox, isn't it, that those tactics probably do work better against the most dominant fit and favoured teams, but nevertheless they're still going to struggle to actually. You're going to have to score more than one. And even Freiburg did, and it still wasn't enough.
yeah.
So.
No,
Um,
I mean, it's like complaining about finding Bayern Munich weaknesses. I always think like, oh, we're trying to find these weaknesses and identify these weaknesses. And it's like, yeah, they're not good at this, they're not good at that. It's like they're still like one of the three best teams in the world. Like it is like trying to argue, like trying to down talk the level that they're at. And
Yeah, they're having an extremely good season, and
yeah,
I think generally speaking, I think the reactions to the defeat in London in the week, I didn't I wasn't on the podcast that you did after
yeah,
that, so I'm not entirely sure what your opinions were on it. But I thought the sort of general German press reactions were generally quite measured and quite 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 accurate in saying that Arsenal, they did play well in the first half, but there's also and they remain an extremely good team. I mean, having an extremely good season, companies doing an absolutely outstanding job, um, and it's no shame ultimately to have lost that in the end, with the caveat that the constant set piece issues
yeah.
are a bit of an issue.
I don't know how you saw it, Dan, but for me it was like a really good lesson on what they have to improve for the spring.
Yeah, I mean, this is also like Maddie's point that actually the response was measured, which you don't really get with Bayern very often.
Mm.
It doesn't take much to create a crisis there, but there were a few columns in the newspapers that usually love to jump to a crisis, saying that this was an important loss, and this will show them a few things of what they need to work on. And realistically, it was a 20 to 30 minute period where they were clearly not the better team. It wasn't like over 90 minutes. Things go differently. They could have got something out of that game. So I think it shows them, the set pieces thing again. On the one hand, sure, they're such a rich team with all these resources, so they should do better for that. But on the other hand, it means that it's really hard to score against them in any other way. So teams are trying to go through set pieces, which is a smaller team like an Union Berlin or something like that. They're going to rely on set pieces more anyway. So yeah, I think bigger picture, the Arsenal defeat doesn't make things. I wouldn't be too disappointed about it if I was a Bayern fan. Also, the way that the English press are dancing up and down about how great Arsenal are in the Premier League is, I think it'll be good for Bayern because they can kind of sneak along and be like, okay, sure, well let's see when it matters how good you really are.
I hear there's a parade planned for Arsenal fans because they've won in November against Bayern.
Yeah, well, some of the reactions were just a bit over the top. And
Yeah.
Josh Mitch's statements afterwards, probably a little, maybe a little, the disappointment was fresh in his mind, talking about that they don't really play football and stuff like that. So he might not say that again if he had his time over, or at least if he had calmed down a little bit. But the way that the English press jumped on that as well, and you just think, okay, Arsenal, you haven't won anything yet. A lot of my friends are Arsenal fans, but like Company said, you don't need to be the best team in November. I would have said, other than that Arsenal game, it seems like Bayern are trying to be the best team in November, but we'll see. We'll see in 3 to 4 months' time how good they really are.
Let's move on to Leverkusen Dortmund, guys. Such an I thought it was a really fascinating game. One where Dortmund, they do this thing every once in a while where they beat a team that I think is better than them, and look really good at it. Only to then fall apart in the last few minutes. And this was another, I think, which had probably both of you on the edge of your seat, hoping it wouldn't come to a late 2-2, so it would screw up your match reports. I know, Matt, you were on location. Dan, you weren't this time, but you've been to Leverkusen a few times, right? So, Matt, maybe starting with you because you were there. Your thoughts on this game, the fact that Dortmund, they're so far behind Bayern Munich now. It's 9 points. They tend to win these games, but they sometimes drop points in like the likes against Hamburg, St. Pauli, etc. And when you watch them in this one, you really think like if you could only hang on a few more times this season, where would you be at? Like I don't say there would be even with Bayern, but like maybe the gap wouldn't be 9 points.
Yeah, it's the eternal issue with Borussia Dortmund, isn't it? I thought you described it really well. You're right. Every now and again, these games come along where Dortmund really, really impress, and you don't expect them to.
You're like, what the hell?
And
Like, why can't we see this every
yeah,
week?
absolutely. Ultimately, after at full time in Leverkusen last night, there was very little negative you could say about Dortmund's performance, about their entire evening. But it didn't start like that. I thought the decision to start Aaron Anselmino was obviously an interesting one, probably the most surprising name on the team sheet. And I think the logic behind it was sound. I think Niko Kovac wanted a central defender who could cope better with the pace of Ernest Poku on Leverkusen's left-hand side, which Anselmino you would think he would do better than Benzebaini, who's more of a left-sided player anyway, and certainly better than Emre Can, who I think would have absolutely no chance. But in the first 20 minutes, even Anselmino had absolutely no answer, and Poku was getting in behind Dortmund's defence time and time again. Alejandro Grimaldo was spreading the play in the way that he does. Mazza as well in the centre for Leverkusen. It was really, really impressive start, and they should have taken the lead. Really, really good chance for Poku when he cuts inside from the left and then fires it over the bar. And I think it was at that point where you thought this could be a really difficult afternoon here for Borussia Dortmund. But credit to them, they got themselves in the game, I think, largely down to Nico Schlotterbeck, who I thought put in a real captain's performance, to be honest. He was in a real physical battle, particularly with Malik Tillman, all afternoon. Picked up a yellow card as well at one point. At one point, I thought, this would be fortunate if Schlotterbeck stayed on the pitch for 90 minutes here this evening. And then, yeah, out of the blue, really, the goal comes from a player who, like I said, was almost at fault for them potentially going behind. Anselmino's positioning against Poku defensively had been pretty poor, and he looked like a bit of a weak link. But he was anything but a weak link when he headed in Daniel Svensson's free kick. Really, really powerful header, and Dortmund are ahead. And then pretty much almost a carbon copy in terms of a header in the second half from Karim Adeyemi. And I think first of all, it's a fantastic cross from Fabio Silva, only a couple of minutes after coming on to replace Guirassy. That was also a bit of controversy with Niko Kovac as well. I'll maybe get onto that in a second. But yeah, Adeyemi put that in. I thought the obvious metaphor, the obvious pun, the obvious joke was on everybody's lips. This was another weapon in Karim Adeyemi's arsenal that we now know that he's. I'm sorry.
He's a
It
real
had to be
mystery
done.
box. That
He's
addict, a real mystery.
he's pulling us
Those
away.
jokes will write themselves for a long
It
time.
did. But it was so easy. This was so obvious. It had to be done. Karim Adeyemi he turned out to be an absolute weapon in the air as well. He's an aerial threat. Really, really good cross and a fantastic header to make it 2-0. And then, at that point, Dortmund looking in control. And a few minutes later, Julian Brandt has a huge chance to make it 3-0. He really has to score when one-on-one. He doesn't. And it's at that moment that you start thinking, It could have been 3-0. At some point, it will be 2-1 because it's Borussia Dortmund, and so it turned out. And then they're going to be in trouble. Arguably, Schlotterbeck should do better defending for Leverkusen's goal. I'm not sure if he may be a slight half yard off the pace there. But it must be said, after that, the waves of Leverkusen pressure didn't really materialise. I thought Dortmund actually, despite all the fears that we were going to see a repeat of Hamburg, a repeat of Stuttgart, a repeat of St. Pauli, a repeat of Juventus, the list goes on. It didn't materialise. In hindsight, they were extremely solid, extremely professional, ran the clock down really, really well. And on balance, you have to say it was an extremely good performance away at a very good team. And sees them up to third. So despite all the complaints that constantly surround Borussia Dortmund, they are third in the Bundesliga now. And you say 9 points behind Bayern, could be a lot worse as well, but they're third.
Yeah, Matt, whenever I came home with a bad grade from school, this is the German thinking now. You should really think about this one. Whenever I came home with a bad grade for my class, and I would say to my mom, who's Canadian, well, a bunch of kids did worse than me, and then she's like, okay, well, that's not too bad then. And my dad would say, yeah, but how many kids did better than you?
Yeah.
So, that's just, they're third. That's great. But there's two that are actually doing way better. So, and that is, I think, the ultimate problem with this club. But then, known Borussia Dortmund fan Dan Whiten,
Yeah.
you're in charge of doing one of your jobs at AFP is to, of course, collect all the quotes after the match. The Guirassy thing generated a lot of news. Also, Emre Can not coming off the bench. He's still the captain, for now at least. What were your thoughts about all of that post game?
Well, I mean, Dortmund tried to once again, another controversy with Guirassy, tried to once again brush it off and say it wasn't anything, just like when he had the spat with Benzabaini when they were trying to both take the penalties and this kind of thing. It's clearly not going that well for Guirassy at the moment. He had 38 goals for Dortmund in all competitions last year. Incredible performance this year. Not so much, and those frustrations are coming out on the field. I think it was telling that it didn't take Silva that long at all until he really, and not just the cross for the goal, but he looked good. The movement was good. Even the best version of Guirassy doesn't have a great first touch and that kind of thing, so things could kind of break down. Even at Stuttgart when he was kind of at his absolute peak. But yeah, I think it's the permanent kind of frustration of Dortmund is that there are other people doing well on this team. Adeyemi's playing the best I've seen for a while. Wouldn't it be great if you had the Guirassy of last year at the same time as that? And what was you mentioned Guirassy in the other question post match?
Emre Can. Was there anything on him like not featuring at all?
I really think that for anyone who watches the games, like Emre Can, everyone loves Emre Can. That's the impression you get. You speak to players, Edin Terzic really, really liked him. He pushed for him to get a new contract. I think he's kind of a good presence in the dressing room. He relates to a lot of the players, regardless of their kind of backgrounds, because Emre's played all over Europe and that kind of thing. But, the late equaliser from Hamburg, that was Emre Can's fault. He's playing at centre-back mostly under Kovac, and it's not really his position. I think it, the way it was with Terzic for the longest time was that he's made this decision to hand Emre Can a longer contract, so he wanted to stick with him. He made him captain. He had to stick with him. But Kovac not doing that, I think, is a reflection of perhaps doesn't deserve to be in that best 11. And maybe he's trying to get the best out of him that he can to have him around the squad, have him in the dressing room, this kind of the glue guy role. But it's if Dortmund's completely fit, who is he better than in the back three? I mean, Anselmino was good last night. Is he better than a fit Niklas Süle, not at centre back? In midfield as well. I don't know that, especially Chan said in the press conference before Villarreal that he's not back to 100% yet from his injuries, so that's probably part of it. But you always feel like, as a Dortmund fan, and you mentioned, you outed me as a Dortmund fan, and being a Dortmund fan is a permanent state of like, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. That's just how it is to be a you wake up. That's just how you go to bed at night every night of the week. And that's just the life of a Dortmund fan, unfortunately. And so, yeah, I think I had the same pessimism as you had, Matt, yesterday, that I thought, okay, this is a classic late equalizer thing again. I don't know if, Kovac, the one thing that he's kind of always shown everywhere that he goes is that he has a really fit squad that works really, really hard, that he really pushes people. So the fact that they're conceding so many late goals is also bizarre. There's been so many late goals. It could be, I mean, what you mentioned, Matt, it could be a Club World Cup thing. It could be the fact that they haven't really had a rest. I think it might also just be a focus thing. Like, so many times after Dortmund has, like, the Stuttgart game was painful because, Adeyemi scores that goal. He jumps up into the crowd. He does the talky thing, which is like, mate, come on. You paid €500,000 in fines because you're ordering weapons on the internet. People are talky, but kind of your fault, Like, it's a little bit.
Well, Dennis Undav, when he scores, goes like this, right? Like he silences the crowd, sort of like, you're the one who's doing the talky, buddy. Like,
Yeah,
maybe shut up.
Away from home in one half of football, after you've been dropped from the national team against a guy who was selected in the national team, you get to tell people to shut up. I think that's a rule. That's a rule to have. Adeyemi, I mean, he's showing the right response to what happened on the field. It's just all this stuff around it. Like, I think it's a generational thing. Like, that's not my generation.
I think I totally agree. It's definitely a generational thing. I believe, I'm told by the kids that Adeyemi is a massive figure on TikTok, and in those sort of circles. And
What's that TikTok? What is that?
Like MySpace.
Yeah.
Whether it's still true, I don't know. But I think at least last year at one point, I was told that Adeyemi's name is the most popular on the back of Borussia Dortmund shirts. Whether that is still the case this year, I don't know. I'll have to double check. But he's certainly massively popular among younger fans. And he's one of those players that I think it's the classic case that if he performs on the pitch, you can do whatever you want off it, apart from ordering illegal weapons in mystery boxes. That's probably put that aside. But he had another not provocative, but another remarkable, I suppose, celebration after his goal in Leverkusen, where he runs off in front of the away end and leans his elbow on the corner flag, hand on waist, as if to say, yeah, whatever. But then again, if you are delivering, then be my guest.
Yeah.
Do it, put that in a TikTok reel and get all your likes for it. That's absolutely fine, as long as you're delivering. As for Emre Can, I think like we said, I think they're probably pretty really valid tactical reason for him not to play against Leverkusen. That was not an Emre Can game with the amount of pace and creativity that Leverkusen have going forward. I think that was the right decision. And I think also sometimes we can maybe just read a little bit too much into things like the captaincy, or some of the comments that are made in press conferences.
No, but Matt, like, I was in San Diego, fitting that we mentioned this since I just been in San Diego again, but I was with Borussia Dortmund in San Diego when they announced Emre Can to be the new club captain, and they held a special press conference for it.
Well, that's up to them, but you hear it from the players themselves.
You can't say that it isn't a big deal if you like set the stage like that.
I mean, yeah, but who are they setting the stage for? They're setting the stage for an outside for an audience outside the club. I think inside the club is a completely different situation.
No, but
I feel like that's an argument that is being projected onto Borussia Dortmund. Internally, Nico Schlotterbeck is effectively the on-field captain, and I don't feel like that is in any way a negative to anybody. I think earlier this season, didn't Julian Brandt actually give up his position as the third in line to the captaincy?
Yeah.
Which I think is an absolutely sensible and normal decision to take. He's not really that sort of player. That doesn't mean that Julian Brandt is is shirking responsibility. He was the only Borussia Dortmund player in Leverkusen on Saturday night to come out and speak to the press in the mix zone, and he did really, really well, really authoritatively for 5, 6, 7 minutes. So he's demonstrating his leadership in his way. Nico Schlotterbeck demonstrates his leadership in his way. And as Dan was saying, if Emre Can is to fulfill the role of, I suppose, elder statesman, mentor, in the dressing room, then that's fine as well. Just because Borussia Dortmund announced to the outside world in a press conference in San Diego that someone's the captain, don't really think that is neither here nor there, personally.
No, I do think it matters because like all the big press was there, right? And you're making a big deal out of it. And if you're projecting that it is a big deal, then and you're taking it serious as a club, then that's the way you're going forward. I understand like it's a different coach, and a different regime in parts now, right? So things can change and probably should change. I want to end on a positive here for Borussia Dortmund before we move on to the last two games that we wanted to touch on. They beat a really good Leverkusen side. Can we just like mention this before Borussia Dortmund fans rip out their hair? Like, here are these guys again complaining about Borussia Dortmund. I mean, this Leverkusen side has been flying. They went to Manchester and beat Man City. You know, convincingly, like really convincingly. Kasper Hjulmand is having this team play fantastic football. And this is a game that if Dortmund loses, people would have just shrugged their shoulder and said, like, yeah, I mean, this is a really good Leverkusen side. So
the quality that they have is incredible. And I think when you look back to that decision to get rid of Ten Hag, it really shows that how aware Simon Rolfes was about who he had brought in, because it was really clear to him really, really early on that this wasn't working out. And we got a bit hung up on the results, a loss and a draw in their first two games. Other clubs have gone on to win the title with a bad opening two games. It doesn't mean it's all over, but he saw enough to make that decision. And, Hjulmand has said himself that he hasn't had a lot of time with that club yet to really put his stamp on them, but he's doing enough. He's got his experience from coaching in international tournaments, especially where you don't really have a lot of time with players. He's got enough to get them performing well. And you just see all these examples of like individual quality. They're just some players, like Poku, for example. Like this guy, I don't know how he wasn't on anyone else's list, because I think he had a year left or something on his deal, and he's incredible. And there's some of the ones that they spent 35 million on. Some of the players, I think there was 3 or 4 players that they spent more than 30 million on. Some of them haven't exactly, come into form yet, and so it's just the other recruits. So they look good, and it looks like ahead of schedule, the rebuild post Alonso.
Yeah, I think it would be even further ahead of schedule if they had made that coaching change even earlier. But Leverkusen, really interesting. Matt, you wanted to touch on HSV Stuttgart. Some dramatic scenes there in the end. Stuttgart really pushing to get a winner there, and then I don't know what they were thinking at that free kick, but that free kick that could have given Stuttgart the win ended up in a counter attack with Vieira, Fabio Vieira, making it 2-1. HSV a man down with a massive 3 points. Just scenes there, hey, at the Volkspark.
Yeah, really proper roller coaster of the game, really, as well. Periods in the second half after Stuttgart had equalised, where I thought, okay, the pressure was really, really building then at that point, and then HSV go down to 10 men, and you're thinking, right, this is probably the way this is going to go against a team of Stuttgart's quality this year. But like you said, if anyone got a chance to see it back, that free kick from from Stuttgart in injury time to, I can't remember who exactly the ball was passed to, but it's actually just passed it straight to a Hamburg player on the edge of the box. And then the break is on. Fantastic counter attack, fantastic finish, really great scenes. Fabio Vieira, really, really, really good performance and a good goal. vital, yeah, absolutely vital 3 points for Hamburg. I think what's important is that like they came out of that spell of Hamburg pressure really well when I think it could have gone the other way. And I think for that, Merlin Poltzin deserves credit for his substitutions. Obviously, Fabio Vieira was one of them, came off the bench. But he also bringing on the likes of Gosholashvili as well. It was not a defensive move, so they retained those options going forward. And they managed to fight their way back into the game, and it's getting a point out of that game. I think beforehand, Valsvar would have taken it. Yeah, three is a bonus. I think there'll be disappointment from Daniel Hoyer Fernandez, but he doesn't do better with the Stuttgart equaliser. So a long shot, which all right, it bounces pretty awkwardly in front of him, but you really should be holding on to that, shouldn't you, as a Bundesliga goalkeeper, rather than spilling it out into the 6-yard box.
Yeah.
So that would have been frustrating from a Hamburg point of view. But yeah, they've is it fair to say they're making a habit of it now, scoring 2 vital late goals at the Volkspark Stadion. The equaliser against Dortmund in the last minute, and then this against Stuttgart. I mean, that's arguably 4 points earned, which HSV maybe wouldn't have expected to have had a couple of weeks ago.
I mean, yeah, 4 points that put him 4 points clear of Heidenheim on the promotion relegation spot. So I think if you have told HSV fans that matchday 12 you're sitting in 13th place and have already a nice little gap to the relegation zone, I think every single one HSV fan I know would have taken that. So yeah, well, I mean, it's a good one because I just hope that HSV stay in the league, and we talked about Schalke if they can come back as well. It'd be really good news. The question mark is though now, guys, is Mainz still going to be in the Bundesliga next year? 4-0 defeat to Freiburg really picked themselves up. They're in a much better situation now than they were just even a few weeks ago. I watched them midweek in the Europa League where they just got a point, but they're in a really good place in the Europa League as well. They smashed Mainz 4-0, who are now bottom of the table. Nico Bongard, the sporting director, spoke post-match that we'll have to ask questions about every corner of the club. In translation, that includes the head coaching role of Bo Henriksen. Then Bo Henriksen did such an incredible job when he came in, turning things around. But it really feels like all the energy and the charisma that he's brought to the club. Someone in our subscriber chat said he looks like he's aged 5 years. And I wonder if like all that energy that he brings, he's one of those coaches that just tend to burn out. And I wonder if we have now gotten to the point where that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, he's a funny one because he came in with Mainz in a pretty bad situation not long ago and really turned things around. I think he has the energy and the look of like your favorite substitute teacher at primary school. Like when you'd come to school and you find out the teacher's sick, and then this guy comes and he's got a guitar and oh yeah,
yes,
all right, he's got like long hair. You could get to call him by his first name. Like I guess I had a teacher like that.
I did have a teacher like that, which is funny.
And he just seemed to bring this energy and bring this make fun again. You mentioned whether that you run out of energy with that. I think that's definitely possible. Also, at some point, maybe that just wears off. If you're not bringing everything else you need to as a coach, at some point, that boundless Danish positivity might wear thin, especially in a crisis situation, especially when things aren't working. And I suppose the other thing to mention is, they're playing in Europe, which is a great thing for them. And we saw last year with Heidenheim that had done really above expectations in the top division. Well, since being promoted, and then when they were playing in the Conference League, they were going really, really poorly in the Bundesliga, and they're actually doing a decent job in the Conference League. And then when they got eliminated from the Conference League, they started to pick up enough points that they got to stay in the top flight. Yeah. So I think that's got to be a massive thing as well. I do wonder though if Mainz know where they are on the food chain. Of course, they don't want to go down, but if they could have a long run in the Conference League, that would be something that would really stand out in fans' minds. And you look at the other teams there in the Conference League. There's a few other teams from bigger leagues, but a run to the quarterfinals or something isn't out of the question. So who knows? But I think for a club of Mainz's size and resources, European football is really taking its toll.
And it has in the past too. I mean, like I watched them midweek against Craiova, and I thought they were really poor in that game too, which was the first time in the Europa League, because the week before they beat Fiorentina, which was like a massive result, right? But yeah, I feels like it just feels like the energy is gone, like completely. And I mean, the other thing that Bungard said is like we're the most deserved last place team in the history of the Bundesliga. I mean, those are always warning signs for me, Matt, that like things can go in a certain direction.
Constant balancing act at Mainz. I think you're constantly reliant on having quality of player to come through that you can then sell on for big money and then replace them properly. Obviously, in recent years, they have lost some big names. Johnny Burkhardt was the big one this season. Brian Gruder season before. A couple of years back, I've really got Philippe Mateta on my mind because he scored against United earlier today. He's a player who I loved watching at Mainz, and who I like watching at Palace too, as long as he's not scoring pens against United. But if they don't have those replacements coming through, then they're going to show combined with that classic Bundesliga problem for any we say this every time, for any Bundesliga squad that is not Bayern, Dortmund. To be honest, even Leverkusen and Red Bull and others have struggled with balancing European commitments just on pure squad size. It really shouldn't be underestimated. And so on that level, it's not massively surprising to see them performing well against the likes of Craiova, Fiorentina, Zrinjski Mostar. I think they beat as well at home, didn't they? But yeah, keeping that balance going. We've seen Union Berlin struggle with it in recent years. We've seen Stuttgart struggle. We've seen Frankfurt struggle. We've seen probably bigger teams with bigger squads than Mainz struggle with balancing Europe and the Bundesliga. And yeah, like I said, you combine that with not replacing quality players who they've let go. You've got a recipe for disaster there. It would be a shame to see Mainz go down. They're a good club. They're a very well run club. Another one of the few clubs in the Bundesliga who are, I think we said before, they remain 100% owned by the eingetragene Verein, the parent club. And they do a lot of things the right way. That might be their advantage were they to go down. Say this quite a lot, that when teams go down from the Bundesliga, the likes of Darmstadt, Mainz, Freiburg, if they were to go down, Paderborn, they tend to fare a lot better in the second division than the likes of Schalke, Hamburg, Stuttgart, Köln, Bremen, much bigger clubs with much bigger, not just wage bills, but just more expensive surroundings and all sorts of outgoings to cover, and massive fan and media pressure. They tend to struggle a lot more. So I don't think it would be the disaster. Relegation would obviously be. I don't wish it on Mainz. No one wants it. Mainz fans won't want it. It'll be a shame to see them go down. However, given, with all due respect, given the size of the club that they are and the nature of the club that they are, it wouldn't be the absolute disaster that it would be for certain other clubs, because that is Mainz 05, with all due respect.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys, we're out of time. I'm going to wrap it up here. I think that's a really good words to end the show. As always, thanks so much for coming on. And yeah, we'll be back later this week with German Cup action. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, guys, talk to you all soon. Until next time, auf Wiedersehen.